In 1928, John Heisman proposed a playoff system for college football. You know Heisman because of the Heisman Trophy, but John Heisman at the time was nationally recognized as one of the best coaches in the nation. Heisman proposed dividing the country's football teams into four regions. The first region was to be composed of states east of Ohio and north of the Mason-Dixon line. The second region was teams below the Mason-Dixon line and east of the Mississippi River. The third division included the Midwest states, from Pennsylvania to the Rocky Mountains, and the southern states lying west of the Mississippi River. And the final section was the far western teams in states west of the Rocky Mountains. Now note how condensed Section 1 is relative to the rest of the country. That's because in 1928, teams in the northeast of the United States had won most of the championships. The Midwest, led by Notre Dame and Michigan, were on the rise, and the South had only just begun to be recognized as playing decent football. The West Coast had gained recognition largely because the Rose Bowl would played in Pasadena annually since 1916. Heisman proposed a committee of sports writers from across the nation that choose the best teams from their area. Now keep in mind in 1928 there's radio, but there's no television yet. The first televised game wouldn't happen until 1939, so not even the sports writers would have seen the teams across the nation play. Fans could read about teams in the newspapers, and radio was becoming widespread, but they were entirely dependent upon representatives, which would have been the sports writers, from their region to select the best teams. Obviously, this idea of creating different sections of the country or different divisions of the country and creating a playoff system never happened at the time. There's a few reasons for this. One reason, there were no divisions in football. In other words, there wasn't a Division I, Division II, or Division III. That split didn't come until 1973, so almost 50 years later. In 1973, the NCAA divided schools into three divisions, 1, 2, and 3. Then in 1978, they took Division I and split it further into Division I and 1AA, which we know now as FBS and FCS football. Back in 1928, sports writers would have had to pick from several hundred teams in their own region. However, the biggest opponent to this playoff idea were the schools. There were many schools that were vehemently opposed to any kind of postseason play. The academics knew that if college football got any bigger than it already was, it would be difficult to control. And they already resented how big it was in 1928. A good example. Sports editor Sam Otis details his problems with the plan in a column in the Cleveland Plain Dealer on October 24, 1928. There's one big flaw in this plan. To make it work outright, every college in the land would have to consent to its team participating in the playoffs. This unanimous agreement could not be obtained, for there are already dozens of institutions opposed to consideration of football on a championship basis. Many of our leading universities are bitterly opposed to all title talk. With only a portion of the colleges approving of such a plan as Mr. Heisman offers, this so-called championship series would actually mean next to nothing. Imagine, for example, some Middle Western 11 acquiring indisputable right to the championship in its section, being chosen by the committee of sports editors, and then being refused permission to enter the playoffs. That would cause the selection of the second, third, or even fourth or fifth best team in the district, depending upon which could enlist official permission to participate. And then he goes on to say, football followers are more and more displaying a trend toward college championships, but their feelings do not coincide with those of coaches and faculty members. While the general public cries for title play, the educators fight to curtail undue stress on football and other sports. Coaches are already having their troubles satisfying alumni and hardly could be expected to welcome championship series or any other plan that would add to their misery. Needless to say, Heisman's proposal never came to fruition. But isn't it interesting that somebody back then was thinking of something that looked like a playoff system? Instead, postseason play in college football evolved into tons of bowl games that were created to get people in cold places to go to warm places to watch football and spend their money. Wouldn't it be interesting to think about how different college football might be? Would there have been a playoff way back then, even if it was 4 teams as proposed here? How much different do you think college football would be? If you want to know more about John Heisman, I've done a video on that you can watch next. I'm John Johnston, and this is Hardcore College Football History. If you have suggestions about videos you'd like to see, feel free to send me an email or leave a comment. Thank you.